Well, I appreciate Kelly, and I'm glad to be here. I know, even if we weren't, he said we weren't, he didn't like me in high school because of his illness. But I know that he is doing such a great job here, and he loves all of you, and I know he loves you very much, and I love them. I love the Carmichaels. Since we got close, we going to church together after high school. And just to show, I mean, I love them all. I love Kelly and Jenny and the girls. I even love Ethan. Just to show you how much I do love Ethan, I told him I was going to try to embarrass him. But a couple weeks ago, I said, I've got two daughters. I've got a son that's older and then two daughters that are on either side of Ethan. He's right in between the 1 year either side of Ethan. And I was trying to get Ethan to ask my daughter out, and he was too scared to do it. I don't know the deal on it. I think so much of Ethan that I would let him take my daughters out. Now they're too good for him, but but no, and in fact, I know that Kelly loves y'all and feels appreciated. But if you appreciate Kelly and his family, would you let them know right now? A lot of preachers don't feel appreciated. I don't think that's true with him. And he said we talked every week we do, but I do appreciate him. And I appreciate, and I know you do as well, and all the things that he's done here. He's done a lot of good things since he's been here in his time here, achieving lots of good things. And I mean, our culture is kind of built on achievement, isn't it? I mean, these test scores or good grades or getting that promotion or getting that raise. It's all this. You have to be successful. There's some level of achievement that's in our lives. In fact, I realized this in my life when I was about 5 years old, maybe 5 or 6, when I got my first trophy. Anybody remember getting their first trophy? I love that thing. If you're under about 23 or 4 and down, I don't care about your trophies. You got them for showing up. That's not what I'm talking about. We got trophies if you came in first place or runner-up. That's it. And I got so many. You guys probably could tell by looking at me like athletic, right? That's what you thought when you saw me. This guy's an athlete. Yeah, you're right. And so I had lots of trophies. I got so many trophies that my dad built a couple of shelves in my room so that I could display my trophies. I was so proud of those things. And when I looked at those trophies, I knew that I had achieved something. Like my life was going well because I had lots of trophies and I had lots of achievement. Now, I brought some pictures of some trophies here. Maybe this first one you might like. Let's see here. Yeah, some of you recognize that trophy, right? You're proud of that one, right? Anybody proud of that trophy? Right? A couple of they're scared to say it, sounds like. Right, well, what about this next one? Anybody proud of that one? Yeah. I didn't really know which way to go. I decided, I texted, or I called Kelly's mom and I said, hey, send me some pictures of Kelly with his trophies, right? And so she sent me this one. Right, I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of hard to see, but look at that glove. That thing's bigger than his leg. I don't know what kind of, he was playing with a bowling ball or something. But how about this next one? This next one, she sent me this one, right? Look at those muscles, man. Looks good, those socks pulled up to his knee. All right, here, how about this one? How about this next one? Yeah, well, she said this. He was so proud of this. He got like king of something. I don't know, king of something. He was so proud of that. But he finished in second place, maybe to the person beside him. I don't know. That's what he says first. Yeah, king of Camargo. I said that was. I don't know. But I asked her. I said, send me some pictures of Kelly's trophies. And she said, we don't have any pictures of Kelly with trophies. And so I thought to myself, how sad. Kelly never got any trophies in his life growing up. In fact, that was so sad. I thought, he's the reason why everybody gets trophies today, because they felt so bad for Kelly never, ever getting a trophy. I thought about putting a picture of Kentucky Wildcat basketball within the national championship, because I know y'all don't know what national championship trophies look like. So but I decided not to do that. Right? So achievement is a big part of our life. We live in a culture that is all about achievement. And it overflows from our regular life. It overflows from our day-to-day life, achieving test scores, promotions, good grades, all of this kind of achievement thing overflows from our regular life into our faith life. And I don't know if you recognize this, but every religion in the world is based on achievement. What do you do? How good are you? What kind of level do you attain to? Except one. Every religion in the world is based on achievement except one, and that's Christianity. receive. Now, I don't know if Kelly doesn't normally start preaching this early. Let me say that again. I don't know if you've ever heard me. Grace is not something you achieve. It's something you receive. Amen. 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 And thank God for Jesus. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and open them up to Mark chapter 2. Now, I want to read a few verses here. It's going to be a little bit interesting, a little bit different. We're going to look at an example of this. An example of this idea where Jesus is trying to teach the religious leaders that this is true. That grace is not something you achieve. It's not an achievement that you attain to, but it's something that you receive. And they kind of struggle with this. They had a hard time with this, like so many of us today have a hard time with this. They were actually, in Mark chapter 2, they had been to Matthew's house. Now, Matthew was having a party. And at this party, there were all kinds of people there. There were tax collectors and prostitutes and other sinners. And Jesus was there, and they were kind of mad that Jesus was eating with tax collectors and prostitutes. And then in verse 18, we read this. Mark chapter 2, verse 18. Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and people came and said to him, "Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And so here they are at this party, and it is so slammed, this party is so good, that John's disciples and the Pharisees are fasting. You ever been to a party where you're fasting? That doesn't sound like a good party to me, right? I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to invite everybody here today, immediately following church, over to the Carmichael's house. Jenny's going to be preparing lunch, and we're going to fast. Okay? That sounds exciting. That everybody wants to be at a party where we're fasting. No, nobody wants to be at a party where you're fasting. So what's going on here? Doesn't really make sense. Why are they fasting at a party? So not only were they upset that Jesus was eating with sinners, now they're upset that Jesus is eating at all. Well, the discipline of fasting goes all the way back to Leviticus. Fasting was commanded by God. In fact, it was commanded by God that every year, once a year, on the Day of Atonement, they would gather together as they went through this ceremony of atonement, and they would fast. Now, I want to say, to give a little side note, a little footnote. I'm going to be talking a whole lot about fasting. In fact, the bulk of this message, I'm going to be talking directly about fasting, but this message is not about fasting. Track with me. I promise. We're going to get back there to it in a minute. We're going to be talking about how do we get there. What is that? Just bear with me. So on the Day of Atonement, Aaron, if you remember Aaron, the first high priest, the brother of Moses, he would go into the Holy of Holies, and he would sacrifice a bull, and then he would also sacrifice a goat, and then there would be another goat that they would lay hands on, and they would take it out of the city, outside of the camp there, and then they would send that goat off into the wilderness, and that would be the scapegoat. That way they would lay hands on that goat for the sins of the people. And so during this ceremony where the sins of the people were sacrificed for and then put onto this goat, they would go out, they would have this ceremony where they would also be fasting. So the nation was to fast, the nation of Israel was to fast as a means of worshiping God, of reminding themselves that God is the one who takes care of them, that their sins can be taken away because of this goat. There was a scapegoat that would go out and take their sins for them. And so on this day, fasting was commanded. And then there's also other cases in the Old Testament where people would fast as well. Something good happened in their life, and there was a struggle that was coming up. There was something that was important that they needed to think about, and so they would also fast. And so they realized that fasting can be a good thing even outside of the Day of Atonement. There would be the Day of Atonement they would fast for sure, and then there would be another time of fasting. But then, as time went on, more and more people started to fast, with more and more opportunities to fast, and it was all good generally. But then it became a kind of a guideline or a standard by which the more you fasted, the more spiritually pious you were. The closer you were to God, the more you fasted, the more spiritual you were. You fasted regularly, and eventually, as we get to the time of Jesus here, in the first century, the Pharisees were fasting every single Monday and every single Thursday. And so they had made this kind of fasting thing, this Monday and Thursday fasting, as sort of an addendum to the law of Moses, where we know God said all these things, and God said fast on the Day of Atonement, but now we want to attach fasting to this Monday and Thursday. So Matthew's party here must have either been on a Monday or a Thursday, because they wonder, as John's disciples and the Pharisees are fasting, why aren't Jesus' disciples fasting? It became equivalent to loving God. This idea if you love God, you're going to fast every Monday and you're going to fast every Thursday. The Pharisees and others had taken the command of God and they had added achievement to it. They had made fasting like a trophy that they could put on their shelf and they could say, look, God, at all my trophies. Look at all the good things I'm doing for you. Look at how worthy I am of you because of all my achievement and all my trophies. It became hoops for people to jump through to get to God. Because Jesus and his disciples weren't fasting, the Pharisees looked at them and thought that they didn't really love God, didn't really care about doing the things of God. And the Pharisees used fasting as a means to get to him, but grace is not something you achieve, it's something you receive. Now quickly, let me give you a little definition of fasting. I know most of you probably are tracking with me knowing what fasting is, but just for those maybe who aren't sure, fasting is simply abstaining from a physical need, whatever that physical need might be. Fasting is abstaining from a physical need to think about something more important, something deeper, something spiritual. It's a form of worship that highlights our bigger and deeper spiritual needs. When we fast, we're saying, yes, my needs, my physical needs are important, but at least for this period of time, my spiritual needs, this worship of God is even more important. And so fasting, for those of you who have done this, I don't know how many of you have, maybe some of you have some, maybe some of you not so much. Churches don't talk about it a whole lot. Fasting is a good thing, but it's incredibly difficult. It teaches us that our physical needs don't have control over us. That we seek God for sustenance and not our physical needs. Now obviously there are limits to that. We can't not eat forever, right? Eventually we have to eat. But we can control our physical needs, at least for a time, in fasting by relying on God and who He is. Now, a lot of people, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people fast to lose weight. Or maybe some of you have done that. This year, earlier, back in January, I'm 43 years old this year. And so I thought, I probably need to go to the doctor, get my baseline stuff checked out. And I mean, you look at me and you think, man, he's in good shape, but it's not as true as you think it might be. And so I went to the doctor, and they the first thing they do, and I knew they were going to do this, and I hate this, right? But the first thing they do is you walk in there, and the nurse says, hey, can you, step on the scale? And I was like, no. So I wanted to take my clothes off, because I wanted to be as little a number as possible. And she's like, please, leave your pants on. So I got up on the scale, and it's one of those things where you slide the scale, and she kept sliding it, and sliding it, and sliding it. And she looked at me and she kept sliding it. And I was like, oh my goodness, please. And finally we got to the number, and I was like, I felt kind of embarrassed. I wanted to apologize to her. And I was like, sorry, I didn't, And she looked at me and she's like, she wrote this down. And I don't really know what she wrote down, but in my mind I was imagining F-A-T exclamation point. And so she did that, and the doctor came in, and the doctor came in, and I knew what she was going to say, because our doctor's paid to say this, I don't know, but she's talking about me and my health, and hey, we need to get some blood work, we need to make sure you're all good and stuff. And so the doctor comes in and she says, hey, you need to lose weight. And I said, I know. I knew you were going to say that. I know I need to lose weight. I do need to lose weight. I know. And she said, do you watch what you eat? And I thought to myself, yeah, I watch myself put it in my mouth. I didn't say that. I thought that. I didn't say that. And she said, do you watch what you eat? And what I actually said was, well, no. I eat pretty much whatever I want, whenever I want. And she's like, well, you need to make better decisions. You need to, because this is a big deal. This is important. You need to lose weight. And so, I started doing it. Matter of fact, since January, I've lost 25 pounds. Right? Yeah. You don't know it, right? You don't know, but this button right here, a year ago was struggling to hold on. I'll tell you. But no, it's been good. But I didn't do that from fasting. Fasting is not about losing weight. But the Pharisees and disciples, John's disciples, they had taken this idea of fasting and made it more than just this thing that you do to worship God. They made it some kind of thing, some kind of hoops that we jump through, some kind of achievement that you've got to get to. And they got in this mode where Jesus isn't doing it right, because Jesus isn't fasting on Mondays and Thursdays. They had made fasting all about this religion of achievement, and they missed the point of Jesus. You see, Jesus was all about breaking down walls for outsiders, making it easy to come to God through Him, by His grace. And the Pharisees kept adding on achievement, kept adding on things, kept adding hoops for people to jump through to get to God. To them, it was about the act of fasting. To them, it was about getting some kind of achievement. If you don't get there, you're wrong. You can't get God's grace. But they were just going through religious motions. And I'm sure that many of these Pharisees and John's disciples and all, they probably had good intentions. They probably were sincere, but they were adding barriers that God didn't put up to achieve this level of religiosity, to get grace from God. And fasting, like any spiritual discipline that we do, has to be more about worship than the spiritual act itself. Fasting, just like serving or giving or prayer or reading our Bible, all of these things they're things that we do as Christians in response to God's grace, not as a means by which to get God's grace. When we fast or when we do any of these other things, but when we fast in particular, we're reminding ourselves that I have tasted what the world has to offer, and I have tasted the Lord, and He is good. He's all I need. Fasting is a wonderful discipline that draws us near to God, and it draws us closer to Him and brings us into Him, and it brings us into a point of worship, but it's not a means by which we get God's grace. Just a quick side note, and then we'll kind of move to where I'm trying to get anyway. Fasting helps us solve a problem. We have a problem. I know that you know this, maybe you've not been able to articulate it, but we have a problem. And the problem is that we get so full on what the world has to offer, we feel no need for God in our lives. See, this is why Jesus said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter in the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because a rich man doesn't need God, at least in his mind. And so when we look at ourselves, and we can look at ourselves compared to our neighbors and say, I'm not rich. My neighbor has a bigger house, a nicer car, whatever. But compared to the world, let me tell you, Christians, we are the richest Christians that have ever existed in history. You understand that? And so we're incredibly wealthy, and we feel like we're so full on the things of the world that we don't even really need God. And why get full on God when I can go get full on some fried chicken? Who loves fried chicken? I love fried chicken. My mom makes some good fried chicken. I tell you. Why get full on God when I can go out and get full on a juicy steak? And maybe some of you are saying, I'm vegetarian. That's fine. Why get full on God when I can get full on status or prestige or money? Why get full on God when I can get full on power? Why get full on God when I can get full on the things of this world? Fasting displays our trust in God, our reliance on Him to take care of us, a reminder that we need Him. But they have made fasting this religious exercise, this thing that we do to jump through hoops to get to God, and it's not that. Fasting is not a way to achieve grace, no more than putting money in the offering plate is a way to achieve grace, or showing up here on Sunday mornings. None of these things get us grace. None of these things achieve us these religious trophies to put on our shelf. So in John 2:18, they ask the question, why aren't Jesus' disciples fasting? That's their question. That's the question of the Pharisees. Why aren't your disciples fasting? Look at Jesus' answer there in Mark chapter 2, verses 19 and 20. Jesus said to them, can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. In that day, Jesus' answer here to their question is one that is so like Jesus. He answers their question with a question. And it had to be completely shocking. Basically, what Jesus is saying to them is, I'm too important for my disciples to fast. Can you imagine the Pharisees who had this self-importance about themselves, how their jaw must have dropped when they look at Jesus, and He's saying, I'm too important for my Pharisees or for my disciples to fast. The Pharisees are shocked. They have to think that Jesus doesn't love God at all. He's more important than fasting. They made fasting this religious exercise to get to God, this way to achieve something, this way to put something, some kind of trophy on your shelf. But Jesus doesn't need religious hoops to jump through to get to God, and neither do we. Grace is not something you achieve, it's something you receive. Fasting is not a religious exercise, it's a time of reflection. Fasting is like going into that mode where you're reflecting on what God has done for you. It's almost like mourning. Right? You ever, I'm sure most of you have experienced mourning in your life, a loss of a loved one or something, a time of mourning where you sit back down and you reflect on the good times you had with him or her, or your mom or dad, whoever it was, your grandparents, and they're no longer with you. You sit down and you reflect. It's a time of mourning. Fasting is like that. There's a proper time for it. But you don't fast, or you don't mourn at a celebration. Right? The same is true for Jesus and his ministry. When the groom and the bride are together and they're ready, you're not in mourning. It's a joyous occasion. Well, most of the time. I guess sometimes when the bride and groom are together, you're like, oh my goodness, this is a time of mourning. Anyway, that's when Jesus was with them, it was a time of joy. It was not a time for fasting. There will be a time for fasting. Jesus says, later on when I'm gone, there's going to be a time of fasting. And at that point, they will fast, looking forward to his return. But Jesus and the disciples weren't fasting because it's not time for that. Yeah, not that fasting was wrong. It's just not right in that moment. And all of this confuses and angers the Pharisees because they have this model of achievement. They have this model of doing good things to get to God, of climbing in this religious ladder. If we can just do enough good things, if we can just accumulate enough trophies, then we have achieved this level of goodness to get to God. And so to illustrate his point, Jesus used two parables. Two word pictures. Mark chapter 2, verses 21 and 22, he says, no one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is destroyed, and so are the skins. But new wine is for fresh wineskins. And so Jesus gives this parable, this illustration, this word picture here for us to understand. And it's hard for me because I don't know the first thing about fabric and sewing. And I don't know anything about wineskins. And so I have to kind of dig into this and figure out what does this exactly mean. And there's two aspects to Jesus' parables here. There's two aspects to this word picture as it relates to him answering the question. The first is the one that I just mentioned, is that now isn't the time for fasting. Right? They've already gone through this. They've already done this. They're in this time of joy. It's not a time for mourning. It's not a time for fasting. Jesus is here. It's not time for that. And the second aspect of this word picture is so important. It's the bottom line of this message. With Jesus, there's this new thing. What the Pharisees and the other religious leaders tried to do is they tried to take Jesus and his teaching. Right? So Jesus comes along the way, and he's preparing the people for the kingdom of God, and he's preparing them to understand God's grace. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to take the law of Moses and they wanted to cram Jesus into that, fitting him into that, so that all of this stuff that Jesus is talking about grace and truth and all of this stuff can go into this understanding, this system that they knew in the law. And when they did that, anytime you do that, anytime you take something like fasting or some other kind of religious achievement, you're negating the grace of God through Jesus. You see, anytime, if we could achieve it, if there was some way to get God's grace by achievement, then Christ died for nothing. But through Jesus, there's this new thing, this grace thing. And just like it's impossible to patch an old garment with a new piece of cloth, the old won't work with the new. It's impossible to try to patch the law of Moses with Jesus. It's not about achievement. It's about God's grace through Christ. It's about Christ dying on the cross for us. It's about him shedding his blood for your sin and mine. It's about him 3 days later rising from the dead so that we can all be saved. Not because we're good, but because we're not good. And because he is. And that's the new covenant. That's the new thing. Which, by the way, was promised by God even before the establishment of the law. It's not a repair. It's not a patch on an old system. Hey, how many of you have apps where you get the updates, right? Your app's not working on your phone, and you get the update 2.0, right? This is kind of what they were trying to do with Jesus. They were trying to fix the law with Jesus. Like he's the law 2.0. He's not that. And we can try to live by the old system of religion. We can try to fast twice a week. We can try to keep the commands. We can try to pray all the time, but we're sinners. And the law highlights that fact. It doesn't save us from anything. And so Christ came not to fix the old, but to bring the new, to bring himself, this once-for-all atonement, not a yearly atonement where we gather together on this day of atonement and we celebrate it and we sacrifice and we fast. No, this once-for-all atonement of sin. No longer do we need to seek out a high priest, go into a temple, sacrifice bulls and goats. No longer will we need to put our sins on a scapegoat. No longer do we need to achieve religious status. Jesus did that for us on the cross. Jesus is telling everyone who will listen, everyone who says that you must follow these things, everyone who says you got to fast, and you got to keep the Sabbath, and you got to do all these things, you got to tithe, you got to attend church, you got to do all of these things. Jesus is telling them that that's the old way. In Christ there's a new way. No more hoops, no more rituals, no more achievement, no more checklists, no more religious trophies on our shelves. And that no more is amazing grace. Grace is not something you achieve, it's something you receive. Now, some of you might ask yourself, but what about, are we supposed to follow the commands? Once we get there, because I know you, because this is the way I think too. But are we supposed to attend church? Are we supposed to put that stuff in the offering plate? Are we supposed to pray? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. We do all these things, right? But not to achieve God's grace, but because we already have God's grace, because God saved us through Christ. Because we love Him and He's redeemed us from our sins, we now do all of these things because we love Him, to show our love for Him and to be part of the kingdom of God. And the Pharisees' tendency to embrace the old and reject the new, that's something that didn't die with them. The Pharisees, they wanted to embrace this old system and reject this new. They wanted to say, no, we want to keep doing these old things. We want to keep doing it the way we've always done it. And that old mindset didn't die with them. It continues on today in many forms. Because people, in general, tend to gravitate towards old ways. We love our old ways. They're comfortable for us. And they make us feel good. And those old ways become ritual. And I'm not talking, church, about the gospel message of Jesus. That's an old thing, right? It's 2,000 years old that Christ died for us, rose again so that we can be free from our sins. That's the gospel message. That's old. I'm not talking about changing our old ways from that. Sure, we hold on to that because that's who we are. But what we need to watch out for, as we try not to be like the Pharisees, setting up these achievement models, is that we've got to watch out for asking people to jump through hoops so that they can get to God. And so we've got to stay away from heading back towards our old ways in that. We've got to be careful about the modes in which we communicate this life-saving message of Jesus. Well, one of the things that I tell our people all the time is that the gospel message, the message of Christ, though good news, is incredibly offensive. Because in the gospel, what I'm saying and what God is saying, and He uses me to say it to anybody who will listen, is that you are not good enough to get to God. You're a sinner. That's offensive. And so what we need to do as Christians is to remove any other offense, because we can't remove the gospel, that's who we are. And so we remove any other offense to help people get to God, to get to God through Christ. And so we, at our church, I say things like, we got to make sure we take care of the parking lot. See those weeds over there? We want to eliminate any offense that would possibly be a barrier to people coming to hearing the most offensive message they'll ever hear, that Christ died for them, and the only way to be saved is through Him. So we've always got to be working on ways to communicate this life-saving message. Remembering the message of grace through Jesus. It's easy to gravitate towards old religion. It's easy to gravitate towards old ways. It's easy to gravitate towards the law. It's easy to gravitate to say that the only people that are going to get to God have to be inside this circle. The only people that can get to God have this religious trophy on their shelves. Maybe you've heard the old song as I was preparing this week. This old song popped in my mind. Give me that old-time religion. How many of you remember that old hymn, right? Some of you? Give me that old-time religion. Give me that. Well, there's a verse in there that says, it was good enough for the Hebrew children, it's good enough for me. And it's a good song, I like the song, but the message is terrible. Theologically, it couldn't be more wrong. It's a terrible message. How we do our religion, the things that we do, doesn't save us. It never will, and it never has. So because our culture is constantly changing, we have got to be constantly thinking about how we're going to communicate the life-saving message of Jesus to a changing world. It's never, ever going to be give us that old-time religion so that all these people who are living in a different world than we grew up in even 20 or 30 years ago, how they can now conform to our old ways so that they can be part of this old religion. It's not going to be like that. And so as Christians, if we're going to communicate the life-saving message of Christ, the grace of God through Jesus, then we've got to be constantly evaluating the things that we do. Rethinking how we do everything to communicate this message. It includes the music, the building, the preaching, the atmosphere. A big one is social media, how we portray ourselves in the church on social media. This morning in a Sunday school class, we talk about portraying ourselves as Christians to a world that is far from us. If we aren't constantly evaluating these things, then we risk putting new wine into old wineskins. We risk trying to communicate to people the message of Jesus in a way that doesn't make sense to them. It's like communicating the message of Jesus in a language that they don't even speak. Now again, the message doesn't change. The grace of God through Christ, His death and resurrection, that is the good news. That message will never change. And if it starts changing, then you need to fire Kelky. Yeah, I'm sorry, boy. But the message doesn't change. But how we communicate that message. It's not about an old religion that we jump through hoops. It's not about achieving. It's about receiving. Grace is not something you achieve. It's something you receive. Anything more becomes achievement-based religion that doesn't need Jesus. He died to set us free from that. In a moment, I'm going to pray, and I know that I'm going to ask. We're going to come up and sing a song. And while I'm praying, my prayer is that while I'm praying, that you will think about these things. I would imagine, I don't know this to be true, but I would imagine that most of you in here are already Christians. You've already given your life to follow Jesus. And so I want you to think about it. Does this message apply to you? Do you tend to gravitate towards these things? Do you tend to gravitate towards old ways or towards achievement? And for those of you maybe who are here today who have never given your life, or maybe you've kind of turned your back a little bit and gone a different direction, I want you to think about these things, about being free, the amazing grace, my chains are gone, this freeing grace of God through Jesus. Seek out somebody, Kelly, or one of the leaders, or one of your Christian friends, to tell you what it looks like to give your life to follow Jesus. So let me pray. Father, thank you so much for your love. Thank you, Father, that I get an opportunity to be here to speak to these people. And thank you so much for the gospel message of Jesus. Father, what a freeing thing to know that it's not about my achievement. It's not about how good I can be, or how smart I can be, or how studied up I can be. It's not about those things, God. I'm so thankful that the good news of Jesus, the grace that you offer, is free and simple. Simply, we need to put our trust in Him. So, Father, I thank you for freeing me from achievement-based religion. Father, help us to always be focused on your grace through Jesus, to communicating that message to a world that desperately, desperately